So I guess we have a question first before we go on with our next thing. Does anybody know what this species is beside us?
Yeah, that's that lovely glossy block.
Yeah. So this is our main problem here in the park. Like Kevin was saying earlier, it was introduced as an ornamental species down at the beaver pond because one of the park managers back in like the 90s thought it was a nice looking species, and now we are dealing with the consequences like 25 years later. Glossy buckthorn is a huge problem with all the blowdown we've been having because if a tree species isn't quick enough to come up, which we'll see in the next one, it overtakes the area because glossy buckthorn, basically anytime there's sun on the ground, it will come up. So as you're walking, you'll see all the areas where there's a little bit of sunlight, there's almost guaranteed glossy buckthorn growing beside the trail. And this is a great example of seedlings did not come up quick enough in this blowdown area that glossy buckthorn took it over instead. And this whole area will become a thicket of it, and we will be fighting it for the next 20 years probably.
How did it spread here? It had to be here.
Birdies.
Yeah, birds and people's shoes are two of the biggest things. The birds, the source, it creates a lot of berries in the summer, and it's a huge food source for birds. And they poop it out along the thing, and it doesn't digest in birds' stomachs. So it's basically like a fully viable seed when they poop it out. So, but same thing, like it also spreads with rhizomes. So it goes under the ground as well, not just with seeds. So as soon as it's in the soil, it'll guarantee to keep spreading underneath.
And it's relatively shade tolerant.
Yeah. It likes the sun, but you definitely see it in the shady areas too.
Lifespan of glossy buckthorn? Do you know?
I don't know.
I mean, without regenerating. 30, 40, maybe 30 years.
I don't think we've had it here long enough.
Like I would equate it to kind of like in terms of potential, like pin cherry and choke cherry. Yeah.
Would it, like, after the 40 years are up, is it just going to be more glossy buckthorn, or is there going to be other tree species that...
There's an interesting Silvercast episode of them using goats for buckthorn control. They fence off goats and then have goats just aggressively browse an area until the buckthorn's all dead, and then
that
move
would
them
be
out.
good to see. That's really neat.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if people get uptight about this. The other thing is herbicide.
That's the one thing that's really crappy in the park is we're not necessarily supposed to use herbicide. So all of our like removal has to be like manual removal. So you're not, what they don't know can't hurt them, but I'm pretty sure we'd get in trouble. But if we make it down to the beaver pond, you guys will see the glossy buckthorn that has been growing there for 30 plus years. And it is like the size of a small spruce tree. Like some of the stems are like this big. So like it's still kicking and it's doing really good. The removal's definitely not easy. It's like removing like a sheet of trees. So what we did at the beaver pond is we trimmed it down. They basically thinned the whole entire area, and then they brought in the mini and dug up all the roots. And then we did plant the area, and it is coming up a little bit in the area that we took out last year, but it's definitely not coming up with the amount that we expected. Like it's a lot less, which is really good news for us, because if we can keep that up in certain areas, then maybe it won't be as many years to get rid of some of the glossy buckthorn.
So this is one example of we've got invasive species coming in. And as our climate continues to change and warm up, we don't know what's coming, but here is an example of how invasive a species can be. You know, depending if you're very happy with it and think it's gonna be great for the birds, you know, if you don't mind half your woodlot looking like this, that's fine. Again, there's not a wrong answer, but this is what can possibly happen if you leave something, and then this is obviously very difficult to have to deal with.
And a lot of this growth is like less than 5 years old, because the disturbance only happened less than 5 years ago. So it wouldn't have been in this area before that. So some of this stuff is only 2-3 years old, and it is this size already.
So the other thing, a good point to mention here, and I'm going to bring Chris in on this, is we have, because of blowdowns and stem break, we get a number of snags here. At what point, you know, are some okay, some not okay? The benefits of the snags, where is it too much for a maybe a fire, or the benefits to having the snags?
Yeah, I mean, having snags on a woodlot is very important if you're looking to have like different species of woodpecker. It's good for bugs and primary cavity nesters. But then it can also be an issue where if you have too much of it, if some wind comes in, they can just all come down and crash. So it's finding that balance, but definitely having snags isn't a bad thing at all. It's actually a great thing for diversity on your woodlot.
So you don't have to knock every snag down. You can leave some of them up.
One of our big things here at the park too is we're allowed to remove trees that could be dangerous to the public. So we do try to identify anything that could be a hazard coming up in the year, and they'll try to remove it during the summertime when this isn't being used. So anything really close to the trail that they think, okay, that could be coming down this season, that can be something that they can look at, and that is something that they're allowed to remove for that reason.
Right above Chris.
Yeah, basically. Like that would be one we'd look at and go, okay, maybe that, like in the next few years, that tree would probably
Those are large. They're alive.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, the very top. Yes, I was just seeing dead. Okay.
But it's definitely, yeah, like that's the one time we're allowed to remove species from the park is when it could be a danger.
And the other thing that's noticed in relation to snags is, I think with our forest landscape, we're seeing like the large, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, large snags are becoming less and less.
Less and less prevalent, yeah. And like those types of snags are really important for species like barred owl and chimney swifts. Like they need a certain diameter snag to be able to use that as a tree. So if you have larger snags and if you can leave them on a property, that's a really important thing to do and identify.
And when you say large, what does that mean?
That's big?
Yeah, like, I don't know, like 30, 40 dBH and like above.
Centimeters.
Yeah.
The rule of thumb for pileated woodpeckers is 45 centimeters, 18 inches at sort of chest height.
Okay.
For them to build a nest.
Okay.
And pileated woodpeckers are the primary excavator, right? They create all the habitat for all the other animals. So
those are their large woodpeckers, if anybody's unsure. The woody woodpecker from the cartoons.
they'll feed on smaller trees, but they need a good sized tree for a nest, yeah. And barred owls, like you mentioned, need a very large tree for a cavity.
So sometimes some of these events that we have happening, like our wind throw and that, they can have some beneficial results as long as we're aware of them. You know, and if you are left with some blowdowns and you might want to leave, like cedar over there, left over, you know, if you can, if it's not in the way, it's not harming anything, maybe it's not a bad thing to leave.
Part of the challenge, right, is like in the historical climate in our part of the world in the Northeast, fire was infrequent. And when it came, it was high severity and landscape level. Like I don't know if anybody's tracked or seen any of the remembering the Great Miramichi fire stuff that's happened recently, right? Pretty fascinating. Like, so that's a good example of what used to happen. But the result of that is, one, we don't really I mean, we have a few fire adapted species, but they're not like dominant in the landscape. And the ecosystems we have, and all the wildlife is adapted to this sort of constant low level disturbance. So there would have been deadwood everywhere in the old forest, right? So a lot of our species are adapted. I mean, the reason why we don't have woodland caribou is that the habitat's completely changed, right? So if you're managing for those species that like those old forest conditions, they're utterly dependent on dead and dying trees. They just are. So if you want to manage it for them, like my wife and I, right? Like I do everything I can to avoid cutting that on my woodlot because I want the habitat on my woodlot. It's just depends what you're managing for.
Exactly. So that's where your goals are important for your woodlot.
But that's the historical climate, right? Like that's the thing. Like the challenges in other parts of the world where fire is a more historically frequent thing, they've got all kinds of fire adapted plants and trees, right? White pine, red oak, jack pine, red pine. Jack pine and red pine are going to leave. White pine will do well, right? But a lot of our species are not fire dependent or fire adapted.
So it's going to be interesting to see where trees are going to be in another 100 years, 150 years, to see how that goes. Unfortunately, I don't think too many of us will be around, but we can just kind of try to plan. All right, next up,